Hi, Bob. It's David Olkowetsky with ArtisanRevere. First of all, let me just say thank you so much for the superb article about our chef's knife. You can see it, we highlighted on our homepage of our brand new site. We really appreciate your support. I'm so glad that you're liking your chef knife. Hopefully still loving your chef knife. So today's video has three parts. Number one, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the business. Number two, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go through 8 tips for maintaining your knives. And then number 3, I'm going to do a quality control inspection. We do numbers 2 and 3 for all of our customers. I don't really do a whole detailed about us for most folks though. But before we get too far into that, I'm going to just do a quick demo for you. This is your paring knife here in Midnight Black. And this is a piece of magazine paper which basically doesn't exist when you are using the paring knife up against it. I didn't want to delay to show you that, but this is your knife here. I'm going to do the QC inspection towards the end. So first of all, I started this company about 2.5 years ago with a vision of just dramatically improving the quality of knives in Americans' hands. The way I do that is by marrying really high-end technology, so that's the steel, that's the equipment that we use to actually craft the blades with really strong craftsmanship. So very experienced and talented knife makers, machinists, engineers, metallurgists, so we've got the entire chain covered. By bringing those two aspects together, we're able to put together blades that are thinner, that cut better, and are tougher. And most importantly, with the paring knife, is far more comfortable in your hands. So that's a little bit about the company. The paring knife specifically is a really interesting tool. Most companies, most paring knives that I've seen have one major flaw. And that major flaw is this area here called the choil. That's the area behind the heel and in front of the handle. Okay? We spent months iterating on our choil area, and we got it to a point where you can choke up on the blade completely. So my middle finger is hooked underneath this blade and my thumb is all the way up here, and so if I'm going to be peeling an apple or hulling a strawberry or whatever it is I'm doing, I have maximum control. Okay, so what do all the other companies do wrong? Most of them have a very short heel. Okay, so you can't actually hook your finger underneath there. Others, the closest we've seen is a brand called Miyabi. They have a paring knife that has just a very long radius, so it goes like kind of this way. The problem with that blade is if you're hooking all the way up against it and you move even the slightest amount, you're going to completely slice your finger open, which I did on that blade. So that was one of my biggest pet peeves, those two sort of issues with paring knives. We designed this after so many iterations to be able to hook under here, and even if you do slide, you cannot cut yourself just based on the way we ground this teeny tiny little curvature right at the heel. Impossible to cut yourself on it, unless of course you're coming at it from this angle, which there's no reason you ever would. So that's a little bit about one of the primary ergonomic features of this blade. All of our blades, as I'm sure you know, have the rounded spine. That's to minimize any potential calluses. We also, of course, round inside the choil area, and then we spend a lot of time making sure that the handle is incredibly smooth. So I'm going to quickly go through 8 steps, 8.5, let's call it, steps to making sure your knives are in perfect condition forever, and then I'm going to do a quality control inspection on your blade. So I'm going to put this away for right now. So number 1, you want to use your knives on food and only food, unless you're an expert sharpener, in which case feel free to use them on anything, because other materials like cardboard boxes have a high amount of silica in them, and that's going to erode your cutting edge if you want to use it for like rope cutting. Again, you can do that as well, but that's pretty deleterious for your cutting edge. Those are very dense, high silica materials. Again, that's going to put a lot of wear on the blade. If you're good at whetstone sharpening, or if you are familiar with the Work Sharp, which the company we partnered with those folks, superb sharpening tool if you know how to use it correctly. So the other thing that's super important, you really want to focus on using that tool specifically for the task that it was made for, right? So like, I would not be using our chef knife to split apart frozen burger patties. You would use either a cleaver or a butcher knife or something like that for that sort of task. So that's number one, use your knife on food and only food. Number two, wash and dry the blade completely. Very important. If you leave a solution of sodium chloride or acid on your blade, even though this is a stainless blade, even though it is a third generation particle steel stainless blade, Elmax I'm referring to, it can still get some minor patination. In the last 2 years, we've had 2 customers email with photos of minor patination, very easy to remove. We like this product called Shadazzle. You can also use a lot of the home remedies, vinegar, white wine vinegar specifically, or lemon juice, etc. Suboptimal. It's better to just wash and dry immediately. You want your knife to be bone dry before you store it though. So number 2, wash and dry. Number 3, it's great to treat your blades with mineral oil. So this is a food grade mineral oil. I picked this up at Target for I think $3. There's a bunch of different options on Amazon for a little bit more. There's like a spray bottle, which I actually think is great, but I left it in my old apartment, so I have this one here. Food grade mineral oil is great for the blade as well as the handle. It puts a protective barrier along both. Food grade mineral oil is great to coat your anything that's wooden. It's great for anything that's stainless steel. It's just all overall superb product. It does not replace cleaning, washing and drying, but it adds that an extra protective layer in addition to the free chromium layer that is what keeps the blade stainless. So number 3 is treat your blades with mineral oil. Number 4, you want to use the right cutting boards. Super important. Wooden cutting boards are great for everything except for animal proteins. So you can veggies, nuts, fruits, etc. on wooden cutting boards. Walnut, cherry, maple are all superb. Maple is the hardest on the Janka scale, so it'll dull your edges a little bit faster. That's okay. They're usually a little bit cheaper, so it's a reasonable trade-off, I think. And then plastic boards, you want to use a soft plastic ideally, and then you can throw the plastic board into the dishwasher to sanitize it after you've prepared your poultry or your beef or your fishes on those. Synthetic rubber are great as well. Those boards are really made for slicers. They're not really made for people who are doing a lot of rock chopping because you're going to leave that the synthetic rubber boards scarred up. So number 4, use the right cutting board. Wood, plastic wood for everything. Obviously, you can't throw wood in the dishwasher. Plastic is good for anything. You can go in the dishwasher in synthetic rubber if you perform slice cuts primarily. Number 5, when you're chopping or cutting, and then you're going to scrape and scoop, remember to flip the blade upside down as you're scooping. Okay, the reason for that is your cutting edge is very thin. It's not good to scrape a thin cutting edge along a cutting board. If you have softer steel knives, you're going to actually roll those knives. You won't roll ours, but you will roll like a Wusthof knife, for instance, if you do that. Another option is to use a bench scraper. So number 5, scrape with the spine of the blade or with a bench scraper. Number 6, never use the dishwasher. I will not belabor the point, but it's incredibly important not to put high quality knives into your dishwasher. There are several reasons. Number 1, you're going to pull all the epoxy out of the handle. 100% of the epoxy will be gone in the first dishwasher cycle. So that means you're going to seriously weaken the handle. Number 2, you're going to pull all the moisture out of the handle. So your handle is going to look pretty ugly. And then number 3, it's a 200-degree hurricane of very corrosive material, okay? And you're putting that all over the blade, and there's also the possibility that you're going to get some minor chipping in the edge, and the reason for that is the blade could hit up against a piece of ceramic, a piece of glass, etc. So again, no dishwasher ever for high-end knives. Number 7, you want to store your knives ideally on a wooden magnet. So let's say my hand is the wooden magnet. You're going to put the blade spine side, that's the back side first, and then roll it onto the magnet, and then when you're going to remove it, you're just going to roll it off and take it off this way. And so you want your cutting edge never to touch the magnet. You want your cutting edge never to touch anything except for a cutting board and food. The second best way to store your knives, although this is actually how I store my knives, is in leather sheets. Very important, if you're going to store in leather, you have to make sure your knife is completely dry. And the reason for that is leather retains moisture, and moisture is the enemy of steel, whether it's stainless or not, doesn't matter. The third way that is fairly popular is storing it in a knife block. The problem with storing it in a knife block is that every time you're sliding it in and out, you are dulling the edge every single time. In addition to that, they retain very often moisture. There could be mold and mildew, etc., inside the block, so not the optimal place for it. So number 7, again, store on a magnet or in a leather sheath, ideally. And then number 8, and 8.5, for knife care maintenance in terms of keeping your edge in good working order. We recommend using a honing rod. I don't like steel rods. I prefer ceramic rods. The reason for that, a lot of the steel rods, and also I don't like diamond rods. They're just unnecessary. The reason I don't like steel rods is because very often they have ridges that can create an increase in a fissure or in a chip along the edge. Suboptimal. Use a ceramic rod. There's a couple ways to use this. Ideally, you're going to use this prior to service if you're a professional cook. If you're not, once a week is more than adequate. But like it's a good habit to get into and do daily. So cooking schools teach it often like this. We don't like this method. We've seen like this. I don't like this method either. We've seen going in. Again, don't like this method. The reasons are few. So number 1, it's very hard to maintain good edge control, which is incredibly important. Number 2, if you're going in this direction, you risk hitting somebody. If you're going in this direction, I don't know if you heard, I just actually hit the edge up against the finger guard. That's really bad for your blade, and if you're not paying enough attention, you might actually slip and cut yourself. So what's the right way? Place the honing rod into the board and move back and forth like this. Don't need to go fast. Maintain a consistent angle, very light pressure. That's it. 3-4 times prior to service, or once a week if you're cooking, an hour a day or thereabouts. That's it. That's it for honing. For sharpening, we really like the Work Sharp. It's a superb tool. It uses genuine Norton abrasives, so you can get a screaming sharp edge on it. The one thing that's super important to note, which they actually don't mention in their guidebook, is that you need to get a burr on one side before you move to the other side. So we can go into that in another video. If you're interested, I'm happy to make one for you. The Work Sharp is a superb tool. We also really like, obviously, whetstones. You can use any sort of whetstone to sharpen any sort of blade. It's just a function of the actual abrasive material and how long it'll take to sharpen it. Lower grit stones are where you do your reprofiling work. It's where you do, if your blade is really dull, you're going to go on lower grit stone, something from anywhere, depending on how badly worn out your blade is, anywhere from 200, 240 grit up to, let's call it 600 or 700 grit would be considered a low grit stone. Anything above that is sort of medium grit up till, call it 2,000 grit, and then from 2,000 plus, you're already at a very fine grit. We tend to like sharpening to about 2,000. It gives you a really good working edge. There's absolutely no reason to go higher unless you're, a sushi chef and you need incredibly, incredibly smooth edges. The reason they would need that for fish is every time you cut, you actually create cellular damage to the food. So the smoother and sleeker your edge, the less cellular damage you're inflicting. Now, to be clear, I can get a 10,000 grit quality edge on a 1,000 grit stone. It's all a function of stropping properly. But that's outside of the scope of this video. Yeah, so those are my 8.5 rules to maintaining an amazing, amazing knife.